Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another edition of Ask the Expert. Happy Friday. So, I am here with you today to speak on the topic of emotional regulation in simple ways to keep calm and in control. So, I'm joined by Dr. Kalinda Lundy. She is a clinical psychologist that specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety disorders, stress, burnout, as well as sleeping issues. She is the founder of the CBT Group, as well as the creator of the CBT self-help tips site that you can visit on www.thoughtsfirst.com. It is called Thoughts First. Dr. Kalinda has been in the private sector since 1993, I believe, and
Yeah.
has been with SIDC since 1999. Dr. Kalinda is our chairperson. Um, Thank you for joining us. How are you, Dr. Kalinda?
Well, what a nice intro. Thank you very much. And thanks so much for having me with one of my favorite topics because it really is all about emotion, especially these days.
100%. Dr. Kalinda, I just want us to start off our topic with what it means when we say emotional regulation and how does it look like in our everyday life?
Okay. So, emotion regulation is about a capacity where, first of all, you notice I'm feeling something, especially if it's quite a big or an unusual emotion. And then you need to understand what's going on. What's this emotion telling me? Because it's giving me data. So, say, for example, you're angry, it's because somebody's pushing your boundary. Or if you're sad, it's because you're hurt. Because if you're anxious, it's because there could be a threat. Okay. So, notice it, have an awareness, and then make sense of it, get the message in it. And then the big one is choose your response. Don't just react. And this is not about just suppressing feelings, just kind of, I've just got to suck it up. This is about choice. So when you've got a choice of responding versus reacting, that's emotion regulation. And it's almost like a thermostat. If it's too hot, then you're boiling. And if it's too cold or it's off, then you're freezing. So it kind of moves like, these heaters that have these thermostats that you kind of set a temperature, a moderate temperature, and then they regulate themselves to keep that temperature. So it's about a skill and anybody can learn. And so the good news is then you don't get reactive, like shouting at people or getting snappy, or you get home and you kind of feeling upset and then you attack someone. You catch things before they spiral. And it's really all about choice. Yeah.
100%. I like how you put it that it is like a thermal. So basically, you're trying to regulate yourself. So I really like
Yeah.
that illustration. So, why is it that a lot of us kind of struggle to stay calm or control our emotions, especially when we are in stressful times?
You know, if we talk about the school system, we learn languages and we learn cultural subjects and we learn maths and science and all that stuff. But we might even have LO, but they don't really teach emotion regulation. So, how do we learn? Okay, so the bottom line is we just don't know how. So, we learn all these things, but we don't learn how to regulate. And maybe that's changing a little bit now. But the problem is that when you're little, I bet you in most homes, parents aren't saying, okay, let's allow the emotion, limit the behavior. There's either the extreme, like very gentle parenting, where emotion can just be what it wants, or there's more my generation suppress, don't be dramatic, shh. And so our parents weren't taught. So now how must they teach us? And I think that's probably what it is. And the good news is we're doing things like today where we're teaching people this is a skill, this can be taught and we can learn. So, yeah, that's the short answer. We just weren't taught how.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And what you're pointing out is basically that how our upbringing or our situations can influence how we regulate our emotions. So, one of the things that I would like for us, perhaps let's discuss, is what are the early signs we could see that we are in an emotional state, or perhaps we are overwhelmed?
Okay. So we would refer to that maybe as being dysregulated. either fighting or flighting or freezing or fawning. So all of those are dysregulated states. So, and what happens then is that the prefrontal cortex, this part that makes us human, goes offline, and then we've got these primitive responses. So one of the first ways that we can know, which I think is fairly obvious, is our behavior. So we either withdraw and we just get very quiet, or otherwise we're kind of very reactive or very weepy. So it's usually kind of an obvious behavioral kind of thing that you can observe. Sometimes we procrastinate if we're very anxious, or we get a bit clingy. So all of that behavioral stuff. Then with the behavioral comes substances that when we are needing that drink, or maybe you don't drink, but like you need that chocolate, or you need to binge that series. So any kind of extreme that isn't like you normally are behaviorally is one. And then another one would be physically. So,
Okay.
physical doesn't just have to be kind of a panic. It can also be when you're really angry. So a lot of it is about adrenaline. So when you've got a lot of adrenaline, when your sleep is disrupted, when you get these weird appetite changes, suddenly you're just starving or you're just not at all hungry, you kind of have digestive issues, you can't eat a pizza like you used to, now suddenly you feel sick. So when you notice it's really just you're out of sync. Okay, so your behavior is different than usual. You're more out or more in than usual. Your body is just out of balance. You're sleeping, you're eating, just how you feel. People get skin rashes, digestive, and then, of course, tension, sore muscles. And then cognitively, everything feels urgent and everything feels personal. That taxi did that because they want to upset me. Well, that person didn't greet me because they are being horrible to me. That would be anger. Or they're rejecting me. I'm not worthy. So we take everything personally. And then we start to ruminate. And we're kind of going around and either sad or angry or fearful. So there's a lot of that. And we get into this like black and white thinking, either or. Like we can't see nuances. It's either this person loves me or they hate me, or I either had a fantastic day or I had a shocking day. And we just lose perspective because this prefrontal cortex is going offline and the primitive brain is running the show, which is never a good idea. It's like when the teacher steps out the class and the kids are just free for all.
Out here. Yeah. 100%. So I like how you put it out. It's a whole body function. So it's our mind, it's our physical being, it is how we are feeling. Basically, everything just changes from how we are normally.
Yeah.
Understand a bit better is basically can emotional regulation help us during stressful times?
Very much so. So the thing is, stress is stress. Okay. So we can't disappear the things that cause us stress, much as we
Mm,
would love to. That would be very nice, but we can change our relationship with them. So obviously, from the CBT perspective, we change our thoughts, our interpretations. But remember, the prefrontal is not going to work, the logic, if the emotion's in charge. So we first got to regulate ourselves. So what happens is we call it the window of tolerance. So it's kind of you develop a bigger window of tolerance for when things go wrong. So stuff is always going to go wrong, but then we don't kind of get hijacked by the emotion. So we'll make better decisions because we've got a little bit more of that control of the prefrontal logical side. And also we recover quicker. So we call that emotional resilience. So, when you've had something unpleasant happen or something triggered you, you kind of reset yourself much quicker. And the other thing is that a lot of our stress comes from relationships. If you
yeah.
think about it, we're in relationship to everybody. So when we are emotionally more regulated, we're not going to say stuff we regret. We actually are going to be a little bit more open to feedback and not take it personally. And we're going to be able to kind of stay present in difficult situations. So you can imagine if something is regulated, think of a vehicle if it's regulated and it's driving nicely, even if there are potholes or traffic or whatever, it's going to navigate them so much better. So that's how it helps you to navigate stress so much better. It's a good question because I think we are all under stress at the moment. We know we're living in a world of stress.
100%. And at times it's kind of difficult to actually acknowledge that I'm actually very stressed because we're always on a hype of I have to get this done, I have to do this, I have to do that. So just to understand that stress is something that's quite normal and our
Mm,
how we regulate also can help us just to manage how we feel throughout the day. So
mm.
in a moment where one is feeling overwhelmed, what are two or three simple things they could do just to calm themselves down quickly?
Okay, so there's some lovely things. So the first one is the breath. So
Okay.
you want to regulate your breath. You breathing all the time. You may as well breathe properly. Okay, so super simple. So lots of people talk about box breathing, where it's 4 in, hold for 4 out, hold. And this is something that comes from the military, and that is much more a distraction. What I prefer is the one where you have a much longer exhale. Okay. So as long as the exhale is at least 2 seconds longer than the inhale, within 3 breaths, you already are triggering the parasympathetic, which calms you down. So sympathetic is on, and then para is rest, digest. And you want a balance. We don't want never to be on, but we just want a nice balance. So we can do one together. So I'll give you 3 good ones. Okay, maybe 4. So the first one, so we're going to breathe in for 4 through the nose, then we're going to hold for 2, and then we're going to breathe out for 6 or longer. So we're just going to do one of those, otherwise everybody's going to fall asleep. Okay, so we breathe in through the nose for 4, so we do that. Hold, and out through the mouth. Okay, that's it. 4, hold for 2, 6 out. 3 of those. And you might even start yawning because it's triggering the parasympathetic. So that's the first one. And then the next one would be to ground yourself in the present moment. And maybe, of course, you're stressed, etc., maybe not feeling very nice, but just grounding yourself, simple. Like just put your feet on the ground. Just, okay, I feel the ground under my feet. You can hold something cold or something with a texture, anything like that. Like I've got a piece of jewelry here, something with a texture, but cold usually works quite nicely, even cold in your face. And that redirects you from the threat, fight or flight, to the sensory. So you sensory processing, and that kind of shocks you out of the fight or flight. So that's kind of the more sensory grounding. And then the next one is naming the emotions. So that comes more from the acceptance and commitment therapy, but I suppose CBT is very similar. So when you're naming it, you are using the prefrontal and your whole left hemisphere, which is your logic and your language. And so it moves you to a little bit of a distance from the experience. So when you're feeling whatever it might be, and you name it, I'm so angry. Like when we reflect, when people call the call center, that reflection is so helpful. Wow, you sound really angry, or wow, you sound really upset. This sounds really hard for you. So just that naming of it. Now, if we haven't got someone to do it for us, we can do it ourselves. Like, I'm feeling some stuff. What am I feeling? And we can all download one of those free emotion wheels and then just, okay, here are my 8 big emotions. What am I feeling? And then we're moving away from that amygdala hijack. And then one of my favorites, we teach these to kids, but I love it. It's called starfish breathing. So I'm going to demonstrate it. So what we're going to do, we're going to use our hand. And when we go up, we're going to breathe in, pause. And then when we go down, we're going to breathe out. So in through the nose, pause, and out through the mouth. Pause. Next finger in through the nose and out. And then you would go all the way to the end. I'm not going to do too many, otherwise we both can be yawning and falling asleep. But these are some of my favorites.
Good. So with the first that we did, I actually felt myself feeling a bit lighter and
Mm.
normally breathing techniques never actually work for me. So at times they are referred to as like try breathing techniques, this is how you can do it. And doing it
Yeah,
alone is quite tricky. So
yeah.
do you feel that when we use breathing techniques, they actually do work? And is there a way to actually do them
Mm.
properly?
Yes, very much so. That's an excellent question. So the trick is in the long, slow exhale. So sometimes people are just doing deep breaths. So they're going like that. And that's not really activating the parasympathetic. So you want to make it just slow and gentle. Just think of tranquil. So just slowing your breathing will already activate the parasympathetic and just having a slow exhale. So things like diaphragmatic breathing, where you just imagine that you're blowing up a balloon in your stomach and then you're blowing it down. So your chest is nice and calm and you're just working with the belly button and the stomach. So that is diaphragmatic. That's very gentle as well. So as I mentioned, box breathing is more a distraction, and that sort of gaspy thing is not good. Because usually people will say, have deep breaths. Don't do that. And then there is something called the physiological sigh. And this is something you can use when you're very upset, when you're just really emotional and upset. So I'll demonstrate it, but this is only for those acute times. So we're going to breathe in quickly to like a gasp and then sigh it out through the mouth. So I'll demonstrate it. So it goes like this. Okay, so we can just do one together. And you'll see when little kids
Okay.
are upset and they're crying, when they start to calm down, they kind of go like that.
Mm,
So this is mimicking that. But this is not the thing to do during your normal day. So you got to kind of know which technique to use when. So if you forget everything, just slow it down and have a long exhale, preferably through the mouth. That's all you need to remember, because that is 100% guaranteed. It will drop the blood pressure, it triggers the vagus nerve, triggers parasympathetic, instant. So I would really just say, remember the long, slow exhale. You'll be okay.
no, definitely. I feel that at times maybe we're more in the mind of counting one, two, three, four, and then one, two, three, four again. And then we're just trying to make sure that we get the count in. So what you're saying then say regulate your breathing longer when you exhale actually allows
Yes.
you to let go and feel tranquil.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that works wonderfully. Thank you for that. Um, so what roles does um, self-talk have in emotional regulation, and how can we make it more effective or helpful?
Okay, so in the old days, CBT was about your thoughts and maybe your physical sensations and then your behaviors. And then David Barlow came along, and this was about 2013, and he's one of the fathers of modern CBT, and he made up something called the Unified Protocol, where he said that thoughts and emotions happen at the same time. So we need to address both. So say you get a trigger and then you're feeling something. What is the message in there, and what are the interpretations of that feeling? So, say if I was feeling anxious before this interview, then I could be thinking, okay, bring your A game, be sharp. That would be fine because then I would channel it and then my behavior would be I'd be on my game. But if my thoughts were saying, this is going to go badly, you're going to forget everything, you don't know anything, we talk like that to ourselves, then the anxiety is going to build and the behavior is going to be problematic. So they go together. So it's almost like on the surface, we get a trigger, we get a feeling, we do a behavior to try and help the feeling, but underneath are the thoughts. So we need maybe breathing on top or grounding or one of those techniques to regulate. And then we need to look at the thoughts that what am I saying to myself about this emotion and this trigger? And so it's not about the happiness cult, be happy, be happy. It's not about be positive. It's really about fact versus feeling. So it's first we handle the feeling, regulate that, and then we look at the facts. So what are the actual facts? What is the emotion? What's the situation? What's rational? What's fact-based and what isn't? And so we can do that challenging, that's traditional CBT, where we would challenge, is there another way to look at this? Like what I said earlier, is anxiety always bad? Well, no, because it sharpens you. Like sports people, before they go on the field, there's some anxiety because they need to be sharp, okay? Or like anger, if someone's harming you, anger will help you to move out of there. Sometimes when someone says, "Oh, you can't do that," and I get angry, it makes me show them what I did, you know? So emotion, when it's regulated, is perfect, that thermostat in the middle. And it's what we think about it that really makes a difference. And one form of CBT is the acceptance and commitment therapy that's a bit more mindfulness based, where they actually use a technique where they say, go into observer mode. So if you're struggling to challenge the negative thinking, you go into observer and you say, I notice I'm having a feeling that, and I notice I'm having a thought that. And then that just causes a little bit of distance. And you can see all of this that we've said today is really about bringing you back to choice. That if you know that there are thoughts driving the emotion and you know how to regulate the emotion, then the behavior is not going to be a problem because then you're going to choose how to respond. You're not going to be forced by automatic thoughts or automatic reactive emotions. So, and this again could be another whole topic, but I'm just going to pause over there.
I appreciate that. So, with you saying that, I do want to just perhaps ask you then, in a difficult conversation right now, and I'm talking to family,
Mm.
loved ones, how can I regulate in those moments?
Okay. So, step one, you've got to know what is your personal warning sign. So, remember, we spoke about that window of tolerance. Okay. When you can feel either a physical adrenaline, or your stomach is tight, or your voice is shaking, or you're starting to see the red mist if you're angry, or you want to cry and it's not in control. So, you've got to know your personal warning signs, or I'm being dysregulated, number one. Then number two, you try and regulate, but just try for maybe 30 to 60 seconds. If you feel, I'm flooded, I can't, then you communicate, I need a timeout. So this is, and we've got to be honest with ourselves. We're not going to use this as a weapon, like I'm withholding, I'm going to control this. But if you can genuinely feel, it's gone too far, I'm flooded, then you can communicate that to the person. I'm dysregulated, I'm flooded, I'm frozen. I just need a timeout for 10 minutes or even 20. Within 20, you will have settled down. Okay, so that's something you can do. And then when you out of the situation, the prefrontal is going to come online much quicker. So plan that before and preferably agree that. But if you can't, so say you can't escape it, maybe you're in a work situation or you're just somewhere where you cannot escape, slow everything down. So you want to slow your breathing. So say I'm in the difficult conversation now. Slow the breathing, speak slowly, pause before responding, ask a clarifying question before you defend. And so these are like little regulation techniques in disguise. So I think that's the important thing. And again, prevention's better than cure. So you preferably wouldn't want to lose regulation. But even if you do, and it just goes pear-shaped, separate, and then afterwards come and repair. You know, it's not that we are aiming for never having conflict or never saying inappropriate things or never losing control. We are humans, so we try and make it as little as possible. But afterwards also is important in a difficult conversation. You can actually repair just coming back and saying, I'm so sorry that the way I said that, I just felt so flooded, like that. So you can always come back and repair. So really, just to summarize, it'd be ideally you wouldn't get flooded. So you'd maybe leading up to the conversation, if possible, just breathe and be calm as possible. And then going into it, you regulate it. But then these things can happen where we can just kind of get ambushed. So slow it down. I've even done that where sometimes if I've been ambushed in a difficult one, I will just say, oh, I'll be back in a moment. I just need the bathroom quickly. Or, if it's, say, appropriate, I just need to send this message. I'll be with you now. And while I'm doing that, I'm slowing my breathing the whole time. So a lot of it is about recognizing I'm being dysregulated and then which technique am I going to use. So you've got to practice them every day so that when you're in it, okay, I know this technique. I know what I'm going to do now.
So with what you're saying, I can hear that it's a daily journey.
Mm,
So
mm,
it's something you have to learn continuously. So right now, I'll be honest, I don't think I'm as regulated. I feel like sometimes my emotions do tend to take over. So if I want to start learning the habit of being emotionally regulated, what
mm,
small habits can I start off now to actually, get to
mm.
that part where I'm reflective of how I feel and I'm a bit more in control of myself.
Oh, I love that question. Okay, so in no particular order, the first one would be there's a beautiful proverb, and it says, repetition is the mother of all learning. So we have to do this regularly, what you were saying, and we have to practice it off the field to practice it on the field. Because if you're on the field, if you're a sports person, and how does that technique go? It's going to go badly. So we need to just make it part of life. And one way to do that is to set an alarm on your phone, because we always have our phones. And so maybe you check in with yourself when you wake up, mid morning, lunchtime, mid afternoon, early evening, bedtime. And you just set the little ringtone that goes off at those times and bing. And then eventually it becomes normal where you recognize, oh, okay. So that's one way. Another two that are big, probably three. The one is when we hangry. So we get angry when we're hungry or tired. So, just check if you've eaten enough or if you're hydrated, because often when we're dehydrated, we feel very foggy and we get quite emotional. And sleep is massive. We have to protect our sleep. There's a very good book called Why We Sleep. I forget the author's name, but there's lots of stuff around sleep. I work a lot with that. When you can regulate someone's sleep, you will regulate them. So we have to protect our sleep. Less than 6 hours a night for 2 weeks equals, it's the same, cognitively, you're as impaired as if you've had two drinks, which is terrifying because there are drunk people everywhere. Okay, so you get away with that in your early 20s, but you shouldn't. Okay, so sleep is another big one to protect. Exercise, 20 minutes of just moving your body per day. Put on music and jump around. If you have dogs or kids, run around with them for 20 minutes. Okay, so, and you could break it into 10 and 10. That's really all you need. Okay, and then, so when it comes to mindfulness or breathing, if you did say a 2 to 5 minutes, it doesn't have to be that long. Maybe I do them as the bookends of the day. So I start the day with meditation and I end it longer or shorter depending on how I feel. But they're like my bookends and it helps a lot. And then, of course, journaling. Journaling is good for venting, and that's the point. And it's also very good for looking back at later and looking at what are the themes here. And then it helps you to be a little bit more of an observer that, okay, what did I put here? What am I seeing? So that's also very good. And then the last point, which might be unusual, would be social connection. So think about a little kid. If the parent is calm, the kid will calm down. So we are wired to connect and to co-regulate. We're not wired to be in isolation. So when you're on your own, it's quite hard. We can learn, but we always co-regulate better when we're with somebody else who's calm. And that is, of course, what SADAG does for so many people every single day, 24/7. We co-regulating, and that's the biggest gift that you can possibly give.
100%. So from what I heard, journaling is one of those tools we could consider. We have to sleep at least 6 hours of sleep. Do some exercising where possible, keep active, as well as having an alarm clock because we always have our phones. So just setting those small reminders to say, hey, breathe, take a
Mm.
moment,
Check
pause.
in.
So I don't think I
Mm.
missed anything.
Yeah. And then just the co-regulating, that if you've got someone safe to co-regulate with, because often we think, oh, I must take my emotion away somewhere else. But it could even be your dog. I saw a study some time ago that out of all pets, when you gaze at the dog and the dog gazes at you, you both get oxytocin. Who knew? So just a thought.
100%. So, in states where perhaps you're someone that is constantly feeling like I'm never in control, everything is falling apart, what message of hope would you actually give to them just to then say, so listen, you can do it. What could you say to them?
So many things. Okay, so the first one is when you feel out of control, it's not a personality flaw that you're bad or broken or anything like that. It's information. Okay, so when you're out of balance, it's telling you that your current resources are too small to meet your current demands. So on my Thoughts First website, there's something called the stress equation where I talk about that. And, we're constantly being pushed with extra demands or we lose a resource. So, for example, say you're feeling a bit sick, you've now got a demand and you also lost a resource because you're out of sync. Or your best friend who normally co regulates with you is distracted by something, you've lost a resource. Now you've got to find another one. Or you've got to dump a demand, like maybe just postpone a thing. So it's really information. Okay, that's the first one. And then the good news is that your brain can learn. So, when I first started in psych in the 80s, we thought that was it. These are your neurons. You can't learn, you can't make new ones. Thank goodness we know that you can. And you can also change, think of code, that we're not all at the mercy of old code. We're resetting code all the time, changing settings all the time. Well, all our devices are modeled on the brain. So neuroplasticity means you can make new pathways and new responses at any age through your life. So that's wonderful news. And then also just to remember that emotion regulation is a skill. Yes, some people have different genetics than others, that's true. But, we all have some area of difficulty. If it's not anxiety, it's going to be anger, you know. So some people are more sensitive than others, that's true. But it's a skill. So it's something that you can learn and you can develop and you can start small and then it can just keep expanding. And so it's really the goal is not a life without difficult emotions, but it's a life where you recognize them and you can kind of like live alongside them. So it's really about that, about changing our relationship with emotion. We can all do that. And, there's a beautiful saying, it's actually on my website, one of them, and it's a saying by a futurist. And he said this probably in the 70s, a guy called Alvin Toffler. And he said, the real illiterate of the 21st century are not those who can't read or write, won't be, but those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. And for me, that's really how I live my life, that I'm learning all the time, 24/7, I'm learning. And there are things I need to unlearn and then relearn. And if I can, you can. And I think that's the best part here, that it's a skill. We can all do it. It's not difficult. It's teachable to anybody, no matter who you are, even little kids. And it makes a huge difference. It just adds to your resource set. And then whatever the demands are, they look smaller because your resource is bigger. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
No, what you're saying is very profound, also very necessary because we are constantly trying to beat ourselves up instead of recognizing I'm a person, I'm flawed, I can learn, I can unlearn and relearn again. So you saying that we have to constantly remind ourselves that it's okay, we learn to live within whatever we're feeling at that moment, and then we kind of get new skills, and it's okay to continuously learn. So I feel that with you saying that it does kind of take away that need to always be perfect, but rather accommodate yourself in yourself and allow to learn
Yeah,
who you are, irrespective of the time and the place.
yeah. At the end of the day, it's what makes us human, isn't it? That imagine if we were all just robotic. I mean, think of AI. We all like the ones that are a little bit kind of more chatty and a bit more human. So at the end of the day, yeah, emotion is just part of who we are, 100%. And it's about limiting the behavior. And that will be because we're regulating the emotion. So, in the old days, I'm talking 70s and before, if you were just suppressed, you were seen as good. Then there was a backlash where everybody was venting and vomiting all over social media. And at the end of the day, it's about having a range that when do I kind of keep it in and express it later, and then when do I allow it out more? And that comes with time. We all learn to walk, feed ourselves, engage in the world. So yeah, we've learned so many skills. We can learn this one as well.
100%. With everything that you're discussing, I feel like I have more questions, but obviously we don't have the leisure of time, and you are saying things that we genuinely need to learn and actually allow ourselves to, learn more about. So can I
Mm.
just ask that we just pause on our topic for now, because of I feel that there has to be more besides just what we spoke about. And what you're saying and what you're sharing is very necessary. I do want to thank you for the time that you've given us today. I've learned a lot as well as somebody that is struggling with actually emotionally regulating. So I do appreciate you taking a moment with us.
Well, thank you for putting a highlight on this topic. I really hope that it's helpful, and I'd be delighted to come back and we'll do part two.
Oh, yes, that'd be great, actually. That'd be great.
Great. Have a good weekend,
Thank you so
everyone.
much, Doc.